Dunhuang. This town on the Silk Road has experienced much history, witness to the venerable Chinese empires and the wide-open Central Asian steppes, witness to countless ups and downs of history, and weathered by the desert winds. To a shell of its former glory, Dunhuang seemed all but doomed to its inevitable fate of fading away in obscurity until the year 1900. With a sound crash, as if the mountains split apart, simple laborers excavating by hand discovered a hidden annex of Buddha Cave containing a cache of ancient scrolls. Thusly does the Dao Shi Wang Yulu describe how he came across the discovery of the library cave. Little did the benighted abbot know his discovery was Asia's greatest trove of archaeological artifacts. Within years, the books and paintings found in the library cave were divided amongst foreign explorers and scattered around the globe. And now, the quiet and serene Dunhuang steadfastly maintains its habitual atmosphere. People have come to call that small room now known to the world the Library Cave. In today's Mogao Caves, the official name of the Library Cave is Cave 17, the 16th in a corridor along the northern cliffs. In documents now stored in St. Petersburg's Institute of Oriental Studies, we can see that it was written in the year of Shenping of the Song Dynasty, that is to say, 1002 AD. This is out of all the documents found at the library cave with written dates, the most recent. Thusly, most scholars date the sealing of the library cave to be sometime after 1002 AD. That is to say, upon rediscovering the library cave, this treasure trove of documents have lain dormant for those close to 9 centuries. These ancient Dunhuang manuscripts have helped us decipher countless enigmas throughout history, but the nature of the cave and reason for its closure remained a mystery. So scholars have devised numerous hypotheses for why this multitude of documents with so many subjects have been stored here.
Our main theory is for safekeeping, chiefly due to fears of war. The Buddhist monks at Dunhuang hid them away to preserve their sutras from the ravages of war, and then they sealed the caves behind them as they left.
Aside from this theory, the academics studying the caves have another theory.
The contents of the library cave were actually the junk documents of ancient Dunhuang's monks. This theory I call the refuse theory.
Based on extensive cultural research, we can conclude that nearly 90% of the documents were Buddhist sutras. Of these sutras, a majority are related to Dunhuang's Three Realms Temple, constructed in 834 AD. According to records, the earliest Buddhist monks arrived at Dunhuang in the Western Jin period, and they have maintained and built temples there ever since. By the late Tang 5 Dynasties era, the number of temples at Dunhuang hovered around 17. The Three Realms Temple is one such temple. The question then becomes, what relation does that temple have with the library cave? Around 900 AD, warfare engulfed the Dunhuang region, destroying the Three Realms Temple and the violence. All of the religious texts that were stored in the temple were completely destroyed. During the rebuilding of the temple, the caretakers decided not to keep their treasured texts on site, but to hide them away for safekeeping. And the monks looked around for space and safe storage. This scroll is called the Records of Three Realms Temple Hiding Its Possessions. It numbers 6 meters in length and is stored in China's National Library. The writing on the text says, Brother Bhikkhu Daojin of Three Realms Temple, upon seeing that the temple's collection of sutras was incomplete, being pious, made a solemn vow to personally seek the lost texts and return them to the temple, restore them, and preserve them. Enriching the temple, the ages and future generations, the sutra collection of the temple were true to Daojin's word.
The sutra collection of the temple was true to Daojin's word, completed by him. There's a footnote below the records, dating them to the 5th year of Changxing, June 15th. That is 934 AD.
This was the middle of the violent and chaotic dynasties, 10 Kingdoms period, when years-long battles disrupted Chinese society. Yet, for the isolated region of Dunhuang, life continued on relatively peacefully. Aside from the monk Daojin, his fellow brothers at the temple must have contributed to his efforts. For any Buddhist temple, its sutras are its lifeblood. They cannot be found lacking. So how, in these decades, did Daojin acquire his sutras? The Dunhuang manuscripts have this to say. Brother Zheng goes to retrieve materials for 12 copies of the Lotus Sutra, 7 copies of the Amitabha Sutra, and 1 scroll of dialogue with Brahma. This was written by Daojin himself. Based on that, borrowing sutras and copying was one method used by the residents of the Three Realms Temple to complete their collection of sutras. Facing the numerous scrolls are the 3 virtues of Buddhism. Since the invention of paper in the Middle Ages, Buddhist monasteries had had systems in place, especially for managing religious texts. These systems employed both monks and everyday practitioners. There was compensation meted out for this work. However, compared to temples in the big cities, the Three Realms Temple was lacking both in manpower and finances. The number of people they could hire for this task was probably low. The sutras stored there had to have an alternate source. Dunhuang is one of the most vibrant trade cities on the Silk Road. 1,000 years ago, cultures from South Asia, the Mediterranean, and Central Asia have already left their indelible marks upon the Buddhism practiced. In the region today, during each traditional Buddhist holiday, the Mogao Caves becomes a nexus of frenzied activities. Local residents gather here to pay their respects to Buddha. In the times of the monk Daojin, in order to do the same, residents often made donations to the local temple as individual or even family-based contributions of things such as Buddhist texts, which contributed to the continuation of the temple. This scroll records the contributions made by a person named Kang Xiuhua for obtaining a copy of the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra and for temple upkeep. The donor contributed a total of 3 silver platters priced at 35 taels, 100 bags of wheat, 50 of chestnut.
Additionally, a cosmetic product called ceruse powder, totaling 2 kilograms, which equates to 64 taels. And as for the overall financial equivalent, 5 loads of wheat equaled 1 tael of silver. By this exchange rate, how much was a ceruse worth? Well, judging by calculations, 1 tael of ceruse was equal to 5 bags of wheat. By extrapolation, that 64 taels of ceruse was worth around 300 bags of wheat. Then those 35 taels of plate would equal over 150 bags of wheat. Overall, that's 600 bags total. Translating to religious texts, that equals 600 scrolls. And the calculation matched up. These were not affordable for an average household.
Many more donors remain anonymous to us, but from these scattered records, we can still thank those who shared their incomes with those in need to spread goodwill. As for the remoteness of the temple, the scale of operations didn't matter, only they can broaden their collection in a short time. Charity wasn't enough to fill their needs. The monks needed another way. Before the invention of the printing press, books were as precious as jewelry, so the temples and monasteries of Dunhuang kept a tradition of exchanging intact and partially intact religious texts with each other for copying and repairing. For this reason, traveling to the other temples became Daojin's most important task. The monk knocked on every temple's door, hoping that within every temple there could be a text to add to his own collection. He traveled near and far, through mountains and deserts. The harsh conditions of the Gobi at times hindering his progress along the desert trails, but his silhouette became a common sight.
On the roads throughout the region, as he begged for access to other temples and sacred texts, this act was called seeking texts. As for how easy it was to obtain access, that's hard to say. The reason being, this means a circulating of text wasn't solely regulated by the temples of Dunhuang. The temples Daojin was seeking texts from could concurrently be seeking texts of their own from China's interior.
Dunhuang's local administration has always been under indirect control from the central imperial government. The Buddhist orders of Dunhuang formed special missions to seek texts from the inner territories. Many high-ranking abbots went back and forth between Dunhuang and the empire's interior. In addition, Dunhuang's local government sent annual dispatches back to the capital, which included both government officers and monks. Aside from seeking religious texts, these monks were there as observers, being sent to the various major temples within China proper to study their teachings. This kind of complex exchange enabled the local Buddhism of Dunhuang to receive heavy influence from more mainstream Chinese Buddhism. Thus, the Dunhuang Buddhists gradually adopted the teachings of Mount Wutai and Bodhisattva Manjushri. Perhaps it was the case that Daojin was one such envoy. This diligent and earnest Sramana eventually became the highest-ranking monk assigned to Dunhuang's official dispatches. This monk Daojin dedicated his entire life to the completion of his temple's holy texts. His name last appears in the Dunhuang manuscripts in the year 987 AD. It is most likely that this is the year in which he passed away. His temple's efforts to seek out Buddhist texts continued for a long time afterwards. With the hard work of monks like Daojin, the collection of religious texts within the Three Realms Temple greatly flourished. In 1006 AD, Dunhuang's western neighbor, the Khotan Kingdom, fell to an invading force. The Chinese Northwest once again fell victim to a cycle of violence and chaos. When the news reached Dunhuang, the threat of imminent war cast a pallor of fear onto this desert oasis. At the Three Realms Temple near Mogao, the atmosphere was very solemn. The fruit of hard work of all its monks could once again be jeopardized. In an emergency meeting, it was decided to place the temple's complete collection of texts into a secured hiding place in order to ensure its continued existence. After careful and discreet surveillance, the monks selected a cave near the temple itself as the hiding place. This cave was one made in the late Tang era, dedicated to the monk Hongbian. His position of Master Abbot of Heshi is akin to a modern-day head of the local Buddhism association. The locals constructed a small annex into the main cave dedicated to the man as a memorial shrine. The monks of the Three Realms Temple moved the statue of Hongbian from the annex in order to make space for their vast collection of scrolls. After completing these preparations, they moved all their manuscripts into the cave and carefully organized them. In order to complete their task, the monks arranged for a fresco to be painted over the freshly sealed opening to mask its presence from curious eyes. Days came and went. The power that filled the Khotan Kingdom never ventured further east. In 1036 AD, the Xixia dynasty conquered Dunhuang. Because the Xixia rulers were devout Buddhists, the temples of Dunhuang remained unmolested. Based on this fact, if the library cave was sealed away in preparation for war, yet war never came, and the sutras were things that monks used daily, then logically speaking, the caves should have been reopened. In reality, The monks of the Three Realms Temple never did retrieve their cache, so what is the reason behind this? After narrowing down their options, some experts present another hypothesis: refuse. Maybe they can help us crack the mystery of the library cave.
They say that the manuscripts to the monks of the time had lost their worth. They were useless. As a result, the monks of Dunhuang disposed of these scrolls in the traditional manner, sealing them into a cave, because these scrolls were of no more use to the monks. They would not have any reason to reopen the cave, and so they left the cache undisturbed. Completely.
Over the past several decades, in order to compile the International Dunhuang Project, Mr. Feng Guangchang has traveled to the main repositories of the Dunhuang manuscripts all over the world. Because of this, Mr. Feng is regarded among Chinese academia as one of the most contact with these documents. So does an expert believe that these priceless manuscripts were regarded as disposable at the time? Dunhuang, as westernmost settlement along the Gansu corridor, has been a nexus of Chinese contact with Western cultures since the Han Dynasty. The earliest contact with Buddhism began in this place. This is the 8th day of the 4th month of the lunar calendar in 2007. There is a ceremony underway at Dunhuang's Thunder Temple. It is said that this day is the birthday of Sakyamuni himself. Every year, in accordance with tradition, Buddhist monks watch Sakya's statue with holy water. This is the origin of the so-called bathing festival. Lay people also spend the holiday visiting temples, seeking blessings from Buddha and Bodhisattvas. Over a millennium ago, the Dunhuang region played host to many Buddhist gatherings. These gatherings all had a central goal: the reading of Buddhist scriptures. In today's ceremonies, this goal has all but vanished. The Dunhuang manuscripts include one of the most commonly read texts. During these religious ceremonies, most people believe that this religious text, over 600 paper scrolls in length, is a priceless treasure. Just reading this text once was deemed a virtuous deed, worthy of granting one's earthly desires. The fervency over this sutra meant that the text was very well used and therefore prone to damage. The library cave contains many copies of this sutra, which were sure to see extended use. In order to preserve these scrolls from long-term damage, while ensuring regular availability, the temples of Dunhuang, under guidance from the local Buddhist association, regularly cleaned and inspected their sutras, immediately restoring any damage they found or replacing the copies too damaged to repair. And what did they do with the now useless copies? After collecting them, they stored them in a place predetermined by the temple for storing superfluous texts, which the monks called Place of Ancient Sutras. Year after year, this place would have accumulated many texts, but why would the monks have stored rather than destroyed these useless texts?
The main reason is that they value the written work. They believe that books had supernatural powers. The belief is laid out so: man's capabilities are quite formidable, but the possibilities of the written word are endless. If a man has mastered the written word, then he need fear nothing. So, these superstitious beliefs caused the people of the time to consider even discarded books to be quite precious.
In addition, Dunhuang's supply of new writing paper came from recycled documents from China's interior, so their supply was very limited. This caused the temples of Dunhuang to be very stringent with paper rationing. The local Buddhist administration required all transcriptors to make recordings of how much paper they used each session. After the monks finished copying a scroll, they immediately check for mistakes. If a mistake is found, they must mark the page in question and take that page back to requisition for a new sheet of paper. As an additional paper-saving method, whenever the front page has been used up, the monks would use the back page for further writing. If paper was this precious, then why did a majority of the sealed scrolls have their reverse sides left completely blank? The experts theorize that this is related to the invention of the printing press during the Five Dynasties era. In AD 971, the Sichuan region began to print the Buddhist omnibus Tripitaka using the woodblock method. This is the first time in Chinese history that the central government published such a large collection of scriptures using the printing method. Because this began in the Kaibao year of the Northern Song, later generations called this the Kaibao Sutras. This is right outside Nanjing's Jinling carvings. They have been in business since 1866, and they proudly maintain the traditions of traditional wood carving printing. With their workshops, we've recorded the original techniques used to print Buddhist scriptures. First, an ink template of the page to be printed is glued to the wooden printing block. The paper is then scrubbed off, leaving the ink leached into the wood. The ink negatives of the words are then carved into the wooden block, forming the printing block. After the carving process is complete, a brush is used to cover the block's face with ink. A piece of paper is then applied to this block face. Another clean brush is used to firmly apply the paper onto the block. Afterwards, the paper is removed from the block and the page is ready. Just like that, block by block, page by page, the book is assembled. After assembly and cosmetic adjustments, the book is ready for distribution. A majority of the original Kaibao Sutras have been lost to history. Luckily, we have one of the cover editions of the book, Zhao Cheng Jin Sutra. Inside, we can see that in order to print the omnibus, it took 12 years. $300,000 wooden blocks, finishing in 983 AD. After the Kaibao Sutras were published, the Northern Song sent copies of this collection to the Liao Xixia, Koryo, Japan, and other neighboring powers. Dunhuang's local administration has remained on amicable terms with the Northern Song regime. They also sent envoys to the imperial court, seeking both money and Buddhist scriptures. With the Song rulers granting their requests each time, this Kaibao Sutra was then gifted to Dunhuang, enriching the collections of the local temples. This innovation reduced the scarcity of paper printings greatly. Consequently, The oft-used and abused scrolls of old were not seen as temple treasures.
Of the Dunhuang manuscripts, a majority of its documents were scriptures. The scriptures are part of Buddhism's three jewels. They are representative of the Dharma of Buddhism. To a devout Buddhist, such artifacts are beyond holy, despite their state of physical wear. It would be improper to haphazardly dispose of them. One must do so with reverence. Luckily, at the nearby Muga caves, there are plenty of unused caverns. While these temples now have a glut of unused manuscripts, it seems that the monks had themselves a convenient solution. They chose one such cave, stored their outdated scriptures, and sealed it behind them.
If the refused theory is correct, these old scriptures would have been very conveniently dealt with. However, the library cave also contains large amounts of government paperwork and financial records from the Eastern Jin to Northern Song dynasty. Why would they be stored there? In the late Tang 5 Dynasties era, Buddhism was the official state religion of the Dunhuang region, which greatly impacted society. The leadership of the local Buddhist society were the governmental officials in charge of Dunhuang's administration, and other high-ranking officials. The original owner of the cave, Hongbian, was put in charge of the administrating to regional religion by the central government. Whatever interactions he had with the local bodies carried the weight of law. The local government was intertwined with the Buddhist association, and any residents looking to join a temple had to obtain permission from the government. This is an ancient disc, upon which is inscribed an approval in 938 AD of a Miss Zheng's application to join a Buddhist convent. This woman, being blessed by a charitable fate, heeds the call of Buddha to seek fulfillment, being dutifully observant to her ancestors, after performing all filial duties, offering a vegetarian feast, and cut all former ties and seek monasterial seclusion. That disc. Additionally, this cave fresco describes in greater detail attitudes of women at the time towards monkhood. The government documents of that time found in the library cave often had to do with dealings with the local temples. Another batch of documents dating to the High Tang exist because their reverse sides were used by monks to make copies of holy texts, and so were preserved. Because Dunhuang maintained constant contact with central China, its agricultural techniques remained very well developed. In modern times, this region has preserved many of the traditional agricultural techniques. In the 1,000-year frescoes of Dunhuang, the daily lives of peasants were clearly depicted by the artist's hands. In the late Tang 5 Dynasties era, the Buddhist monks of Dunhuang probably supported themselves in this way. Similar to those peasants, in growing crops, the temple was kept provisioned, as well as able to afford governmental taxes, as well as military and other requisitions when needed. So as you can see, it is natural to find documents regarding finances alongside the other contents of the library cave. In reality, the documents of the library cave covered many subjects, including many Confucian texts and other texts of rare, esoteric religions and books from the minor ethnicities along ancient China's western borders, and many documents depicting everyday life and society. This wide array of primary documents help us understand the vibrant society of ancient times. and provide vivid records thereof. In addition, the library cave contained many beautiful paintings on silk and other artistic works, requiring us to have second thoughts. About the refuse theory, before the library cave was sealed, the Dunhuang Buddhist Association's deputy head gathered the heads of the local temples and comprehensively surveyed their progress at accumulating religious scriptures. After completing this, inventory was made of all the extraneous artifacts. After extensive debates and surveys, the monks decided that the annex in Hongbian's cave was just the right size for a storage area to dispose of these artifacts, and thus various religious sutras, documents, and donations were sealed up in this room for near on 1,000 years. When the library cave was discovered in 1900 AD, these ancient scrolls were arranged in neatly arranged stacks, despite the constant rummaging by Wang Yuanlu. Until Stein's arrival in 1907, the library cave essentially maintained in its well-organized state. Stein's description of the cave in his Ruins of Desert Cathay are believed by experts to be how the original monks arranged its contents just prior to the cave sealing. The miscellaneous artifacts and artworks were all carefully stored in separate packages. If these items were considered junk, then why did they merit special disposal? Based on this evidence, the refuse theory cannot give us a clear explanation either.
I think that the Dunhuang manuscripts were originally discarded by ancient monks. That doesn't mean, however, that I think these documents are worthless. Well, I value their documents differently. These documents merit research as cultural artifacts, ancient literature, and examples of ancient calligraphy. Consequently, they are a trove of ancient treasures left by the ancients to the people of China so that we may now study and understand our rich and beautiful cultural heritage.
The Dunhuang manuscripts number around 58,000 in total, as well as artwork and other miscellaneous records. Today, the manuscripts have served as a window to the past lives of ancient Chinese. This painting is the oldest and most detailed depiction of the stars in the world to date. This Tang-era manuscripts on dances help us understand the dance choreography of a bygone era. This document regarding the Huineng Sutras gives us more comprehensive understanding of the early history of Zen Buddhism, a distinctly Chinese offshoot of Buddhism. Other documents from the Dunhuang manuscripts enable us to observe the transformation of ancient Chinese calligraphy and other cultural minutiae. Based on these facts, the library cave really is a treasure trove. After its rediscovery, the academics of the world dedicated a whole school of study towards researching Dunhuang. The Dunhuang manuscripts have become a goldmine of information, for those researching ancient China, Chinese history, China's western region, and the history of Central Asia. Regardless of the original reason for sealing the cave, be it for safekeeping or for disposal, these are all conjectures based on piecing together scattered clues. We can never completely answer this ancient riddle. Perhaps the solution to this riddle will never appear, but the beautiful frescoes, vivid sculptures, and precious documents of the Mogao Caves allow us to really read the pulse of history. Because in these caves, history is able to clearly engage us in dialogue.